Knights in space. What more do I have to say? Those three words are kind of the cornerstone of Space Marine identity. Monastic brotherhoods of gene-enhanced warriors more likely to duel someone than they are to blast them away with a bolter. But even within that identity, there is one legion, and yes, I did say legion and not chapter, that does this better than anyone else: the Dark Angels. So, with a new edition of the Horus Heresy on the horizon, I figured it would be a good time to sit down and figure out how the honored 1st Legion organizes its forces and paints its heraldry on this episode of T.O.E.s and Transfers. But first, why T.O.E.s? A table of organization and equipment is a spreadsheet of how branches of the military are assembled and organized. But why stop at real militaries? Throughout the ages of Warhammer, many an author has attempted to fit chapters, legions, regiments, and more onto their own T.O.E., giving us players the chance to organize our own forces exactly how they would appear in the lore. T.O.E.s and Transfers is a series that puts all this information together to give you the ultimate tool in collecting, organizing, and painting your miniatures for the ultimate Codex-approved Warhammer army. And for this first 30k episode of T.O.E.s and Transfers, I'm going to be focusing on the Dark Angels. This legion has a ton of history, even before the Great Crusade, but I will be trying to restrict myself to just the Horus Heresy. It's more relevant for all the transfer sheets and unit markings. But for the sake of completion, a quick note about the first. The Dark Angels were the original Angels of Death, being the first legion organized to replace the Thunder Warriors. They took the name Angels of Death to heart, adopting the Grim Reaper symbol as a hallmark of the legion. At this time, the legion's specialties were organized into hosts that focused on one type of warfare. Many of these would eventually be reformed into the Hexagrammaton, which we'll discuss in a minute, while others would be wholly disbanded. Of particular note in my opinion is the Host of Pentacles. This was the first experiment with incorporating War Witches, or Psykers, into the Legionis Astartes. This is mostly replaced by 30k, but Host of Pentacles sounds a whole lot cooler than Librarius in my opinion. But now let's get to the more relevant structures of the Legion. The Dark Angels are defined by their complicated Byzantine system of orders, wings, and ranks. Within the Legion, there are no fewer than 3 different organizational structures. All this is to say that honestly, this will be an uphill battle. Not understanding all of it is kind of the point, but I'll be doing my best to put all of this into context at the very least. So let's start with the most structured of them, the Principia Belicosa. This is the tome that outlines how a Legion should be organized. The Dark Angels do take some liberties with titles, but they still more or less follow the standard structure. It's also worth noting that in the Principia Belicosa, it outlines that each Legion should be about 10,000 Marines. That's at least the goal. However, during the Horus Heresy, many legions ended up either under or over strength depending on the circumstances. But in this video, we'll still be shooting for 10,000 to keep things nice, even, and understandable. With all that out of the way, let's get into it. At the top, effectively in charge of all 10,000 legionaries, was the Primarch Lionel Johnson. His command staff also included his praetors, Legion Standard Bearers, and Honor Guard. In addition to the Legion's praetors, the Lion is also attended by a Council of Masters, the 6 Astartes who have come to lead each of the Hexagrammaton's wings. Don't worry, we'll get to them in a little bit. It's also worth noting that the orders of the Hekatonystika had a similar council in the Conclave of Preceptors, but the naturally more secretive orders led to this council being rarely convened. From here, the Legion is further broken into chapters, each of around 1,000 Marines. In the First Legion, each chapter is led by a Knight Praetor, the Legion-specific equivalent of a Praetor. Get used to that. If the helmets and names weren't enough to clue you in on the whole King Arthur vibe, the Dark Angels really love putting the word Knight in front of everything. Each Knight Praetor was additionally assisted by a staff of consuls, just like the Lion was. The term consul is essentially a catch-all for adjutants assigned to assist an officer. This could be anything from chaplain consuls or librarian consuls that most legions had, to the more specific varietals such as paladins, who were consuls assigned from the orders of the Hekatonystika. Also similar to the Legion, each chapter had its own Vexillarius of standard bearers, equerries, and subalterns, as well as its own honor guard. Each chapter was broken into battalions of around 500 Marines. The commanding officer of this formation would be a Knight Commander, the Legion-specific variant of a Lieutenant Commander. Just like the chapter, each battalion similarly has its own Vexillarius, honor guard, and consuls. Each battalion was further broken into 5 companies, each led by a Knight Captain. Instead of having the full command staff of other units, companies might only have a standard bearer and bodyguard squad instead. However, additional resources such as dreadnoughts, apothecaries, and specialized squads can be attached here as well. Typically, each company within a battalion had a specific purpose. The first company was made of the unit's veterans. The second, third, and fourth companies were mostly made of battle line units. And the fifth was made of varied specialists that could be called upon as needed. These companies were divided into groups of 3 squads, each overseen by a lieutenant. I couldn't find a Legion-specific alternative for that title, but it would probably just be Knight Lieutenant, to be honest. In these groups, the 1st and 2nd squads were battle line squads and consisted of 10 to 20 Marines. The 3rd was a support squad and consisted of 5 to 10 Marines. And so the Legion was ordered. Officially, anyway. This is the structure that the Dark Angels adhere to the strictest, at least to the casual observer. But within this structure, there are 2 other hierarchies, the Hexagrammaton and the Hekatonystika, the orders and the wings. The Hexagrammaton is a little bit more familiar to 40k players, so we'll start there. Once the Lion rejoined his Legion, he began work to reorganize it, both for the sake of efficiency, but also to incorporate elements from the knightly orders of Caliban. The wings of the Hexagrammaton are an example of this, being the descendant elements of the hosts that made up the Legion pre-unification. As of the Heresy, there are 6, represented in this symbol of the 6-pointed star. The Storm Wing is the largest of the wings, and incorporated a majority of the Legion's line infantry. This wing is focused on exemplifying all the qualities of a typical soldier, and while it may be the largest, its inner circles are the strictest, and few Astartes are allowed within them. The Deathwing are the remnants of the Host of Crowns, the host dedicated to breaking the lines of the enemy. They are the elites of the Legion, veterans to a man. Their veterancy gave the Deathwing a more influential role in the Council of Masters as the Heresy continued. It's also common for inductees to have taken mortal wounds in the place of their brothers, but not an automatic requirement, I don't think. The Raven Wing is largely focused on mobile warfare, whether that's through drop pod assault or mounted charges. Unlike 40k, the Raven Wing at this time also included a great deal of infantry to facilitate that. The Dread Wing is perhaps my favorite addition, because their only goal is the complete annihilation of the enemy. Picture units like Destroyer Squads and the newly announced Saturnine Terminators. Interestingly, as the Heresy made clear that librarians would be useful to loyalists as well as traitors, many war witches that were granted leave to tap into their powers once again were inducted into the Dread Wing. The Iron Wing is the vehicle-focused wing, dedicated to the overwhelming strength of massed armored assault. Though in addition to tanks and vehicles, Terminators and Breacher squads were also a common sight within this wing. Then finally is the Fire Wing. The Crusade Black Book puts this best in that the Fire Wing dedicated themselves to the bloody subtleties of warfare. It was the hidden blade of the Legion, the knife in the dark, and the blade against the throat. The organization of each wing is sometimes variable, but the standards are as follows. A legionary will enter a wing as an initiate, just beginning his study of the wing's ways of war. Eventually, he will advance to the rank of Proctor. Here he's recognized as being more experienced, but not quite privy to the full extent of the wing's secrets. From there, if a legionary is allowed to continue, he will enter the ranks of the Inner Circle. These are brothers who have proved themselves in service to their wing and legion, and are granted more sensitive knowledge. This most often comes with the rank of Marshal. And at the head of the entire wing is the Master, also called a voted lieutenant, on account of them being, well, voted. The Masters of each of the 6 wings make up the Council of Masters that directly advise the Lion himself. So that's how the Hexagrammaton is ordered. You probably have a few questions about how that works within the overall Legion structure, and we'll get there, I promise. But first, just so that all the information is on the table, let's go over the Hekatonystika. The Hekatonystika is by far the most clandestine and Byzantine structure within the Dark Angels. It is the spiritual successor of the Orders of Caliban, and represents groups of legionaries who seek to understand one particular facet of warfare. This is indeed similar to the wings of the Hexagrammaton, but the orders of the Hekatonystika are much more specific. Each is dedicated to the study and safeguarding of a particular part of the Legion's gathered lore. It could be a specific style of combat, or even how to combat a specific species of Xenos. Each order guards its knowledge closely, dedicating themselves to understanding and protecting it both. These orders are largely unnumbered within the Legion, without a functioning governing body to oversee them all. Think of them more as brotherhoods within the Legion as opposed to a firm military unit. They do have a rough organizational structure, but to keep things nice and complicated, each order kind of used their own titles. However, the template is as follows. The first rank is that of an adept, similar to the initiates of the Hexagrammaton. The next rank, that of Cenobite, is a little bit interesting. This is a unique and honorary title given only when a battle brother takes to the field alongside others of his wing as a unified unit. It symbolizes the temporary supremacy of the Order's structure as opposed to that of the Legion. This is shed once the battle is over and the legionary returns to his place within his regular unit. The next and permanent rank is Seneschal, kind of the equivalent of the Hexagrammaton's Marshal. And then finally is Preceptor. A Preceptor is the overall leader of an order, and presides directly over its garnered knowledge and members. That's cool and all, but how do these 3 different structures function within one legion? Well, I've found it handy to think of it like this. The Hexagrammaton and the Hekatonystika are parallel but secondary to the orders of the Principia Belicosa. Flexibility is the MO of the Dark Angels, and these three hierarchies allow them both the most flexibility and the most specialization when necessary. As standard, a legionary will fight with his standard unit, as outlined by the Principia Belicosa. It's not until specific battlefield needs arise that a legionary will leave his regular unit, as outlined by the Principia Belicosa, to join his wing or order as a unified force. The Battle Brother can hold a rank in all three hierarchies, even if some might outweigh others. A Knight Captain could be a mere adept in an order, while also being a marshal in a wing. Yet, until the need arises for his wing or order to be fielded as a unit, he operates within his role as a Knight Captain. Which, yes, does lead to some very complicated heraldry, but again, that's kind of the point. But now that we have an idea of how the Legion organizes itself, how is all of that organization represented on the miniatures? The typical color of a 1st Legion legionary is black, with silver trim and red eye lenses. When a legionary takes a mortal wound in the protection of a Battle Brother, that armor panel is painted in white or bone, and often decorated with an additional ceramite plug. Alternatively, armor panels can also be painted green to honor Caliban. And of course, the Legion symbol is worn on the left pauldron. Beyond this though, the specific colors and markings that any Battle Brother will bear are dependent on his station within the Hexagrammaton and the Hekatonystika. The right pauldron may bear the battlefield role of a legionary, but alternatively could show the wing that he is a part of. Iconography of the orders is typically a bit harder to decipher. Most commonly, it comes in the form of symbols, patterns, or physical attachments to subtly hint at a legionary's place within each order. Two pieces of heraldry that the Dark Angels seem to particularly enjoy appear on the vambraces. Often, one bears a checkered pattern while the other bears a parchment clasped around it. There is conflicting information in the source books, with one stating that the scroll is the Edict of Incorporation, a reference to the unification of the three hierarchies of the Legion, while another states that it's simply an Oath of Moment, and that the checkers on the other arm is representative of the Edict of Incorporation. So with the conflicting information that we have, I can't give a firm answer. There aren't too many models that actually have the wrapped scroll molded on them, so maybe the checkerboard is a safer way to go, but either way, it's up to you. Many Marines, especially praetors and other officers, also decorate their pauldrons and other armor panels with unique heraldic devices. Most commonly checkers, but I don't see a reason why other devices couldn't be included instead. But that's a majority of the easy stuff out of the way, so now we're on to the markings and transfers. Starting easy, these ones down here are made for vehicles and banners, the square ones, of course, being the ones for the banners. The sword and shield are easy enough to recognize as the Legion's symbol, and the big spooky skeletons are a reference to the Legion's origin as the original Angels of Death. So maybe that symbol is a bit more fitting for vehicles that are, to your headcanon, still kicking around from the end days of the Unification Wars. Jumping to the top, we can see the Legion symbols in different colors. With all the heraldry shenanigans that Dark Angels have going on, the different colors I believe are just to stand out on different colors of pauldron. The white ones wouldn't work well on the bone-colored Deathwing armor, for instance. Staying in this column and moving down, we see a lot of ones. This is an additional decoration that just references the Dark Angels being the 1st Legion. Below that are lions and lion heads. These, as far as I can gather, are to denote command units. It also appears on dreadnoughts, so it may have an additional meaning as another veteran mark as well. Below that, we start getting a little more complex. These are both alternate symbols for the wings. The winged hourglass references the Dreadwing, while the crossed keys are a common symbol for the Deathwing. Below them, the hooded skulls are a reference to the original Angels of Death, and are now used as an honor marking for Terran veterans. And to their right, the crosses are standard veteran markings. Below that, we have the first embarrassment of this section. I could not find a source for the crossed chains. If you've seen them before, please let me know. Current evidence leads me to believe it's another symbol for the Deathwing, since they have the market on crossed things cornered. Below them are L's referencing the lion and a couple different symbols for the Hexagrammaton. The 7-pointed star is another one that I could only find community debate on, but current thought points to it being a symbol for the Hexagrammaton with the 7th point representing the Primarch. Now in the other column, we have symbols for each wing. Color differences are, again, largely down to contrast and aesthetic, except for the gold, which is often used to represent a higher rank, perhaps a legionary within that wing's inner circle. Below that are battlefield role icons. Same deal with the color here. Though some are a little bit different than the 40k counterparts, here's what they all mean. And finally, we have some smaller symbols that we've already talked about. These are meant for greaves, but denote the same things as the larger versions. The uncrossed keys can be symbols for the Deathwing, though single keys have also been seen as symbols for the Hekatonistic orders. And the little H-looking things are, I believe, variant crosses for denoting veterancy. Alternatively, perhaps a symbol for either the Hexagrammaton or the Hekatonystika, maybe the latter, as it doesn't have a otherwise unifying symbol. But finally, that takes us to the end of the transfer sheet. Personally, I absolutely love how complicated the First Legion made their markings, even if that means I definitely got something wrong here. I would also like to note that I do plan on tackling the 40k Dark Angels at some point, but community consensus seemed to point that the 30k Dark Angel color scheme was actually the preferred one, so I started there. More legions and factions will also be coming up soon, so make sure to stick around for those and let me know which one you'd like to see next. Drop a comment if you have any questions or clarifications, leave a like if this helped you understand your legion a little bit better, subscribe and turn notifications on to never miss an episode of T.O.E.s and Transfers, and until we meet again friends, be safe, be kind, and don't you dare go hollow.